Virtual teachers, are they the answer to the recruitment crisis in English schools? We're going to find out. So today I'm joined by a very special guest. This is Kat Morgan. Hi, Kat.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Craig has gone AWOL, so thank you very much for coming and joining me today. I'd actually like to just tell our audience a little bit about your experience in education.
Yeah, well, I spent 20 years in the classroom teaching computer science, head of department for most of that time, assistant principal for a bit of that as well. So a big chunk of my time. Then I went to work for Recruitment for a while, whilst they had an education department. And now I work for an AI edtech startup called Mindjoy, and we do cool things with AI in the classroom.
That's brilliant. Okay, so you know what you're talking about then when it comes to teaching and learning. I think that's the critical thing.
I haven't forgotten too much just yet. It seems to be sticking around.
Brilliant.
The muscle memory is still there. You know, I stand in front of a room of children and I'm like, present mode. It's just there.
Excellent. Right, let's get into it. Okay, virtual teachers, are they the solution to the recruitment crisis? So let me lay this out for everybody so they know what we're talking about. And then I'm really interested in what your opinions are on this. So the principle is this: not every school can get a experienced, qualified subject specialist. And there's a real issue at the moment in physics, maths, computing, especially, and other subjects too. And it's becoming very, very difficult to recruit teachers, never mind the best teachers. And so one innovation, if you like, is that you go for a model of virtual teachers. And the principle is that you employ a subject specialist teacher, highly qualified, know their stuff. That's not the issue. And they essentially teach remotely, but not in a COVID way. What we mean by that is they would be remote, could be 100 miles away. But then the students are in the classroom at the school. So they're all in the class together and they have a teaching assistant or possibly another teacher, but a teaching assistant to all intents and purposes in the classroom that is there to support learning. And what would happen is the teacher will do their teaching bit, including question and answer and that sort of thing from the front. They'll be able to see the students on their screens. Well, they'll be able to see the classroom, certainly, depending on the setup. And the students will be able to interact with the learning process through their electronic devices, whether that's a tablet computer or whatever the device happens to be. So there's still the option there for the students to essentially use mini whiteboards, do work, teacher to see the work, that kind of thing. So really what we're talking about here is the only difference being that the teacher themselves is not in the room. The teacher is on a whiteboard, essentially being projected to the class. And so I guess the question is, could this be a solution to the problem of the recruitment crisis? Because at the moment, we tend to think of teachers being in front of, say, class of 30, maybe a few more than that, a few less possibly at GCSE, depending on your setup, and at A level, probably fewer than that. And so this is an opportunity really to have the very best teachers in front of a wider, larger number of students at any one time, being supported by their teaching assistant in the classroom. So what do we think?
I think it solves the recruitment crisis by, no. I mean, more straightforwardly, I think that it's not only a solve the recruitment crisis, but it does give certain kinds of teacher the ability to do great things in a classroom that they otherwise maybe wouldn't be able to. Now, I'll give you some background, right? Like I line managed and was head of department for computer science. I was assistant principal in charge of science and tech and computer science. So I've been involved in the recruitment crisis right there, and I've struggled to get anybody to apply for a job. You put a job out 2, 3, 4 times, and what's happening to the classroom at that time is you've got cover, or you've got non-specialist staff in there doing it anyway. I think it's fair to say that I think it's probably a better experience to have someone in the classroom who is a very good teacher and is able to manage the classroom and support the learning, but have the subject knowledge coming from a virtual remote source, than it is to put people in the classroom with a good teacher but with zero subject knowledge. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine myself being in a board of governors meeting, right, where essentially this is being proposed and you have to discuss it and come to a conclusion about whether it's something that you want to put into your school or
Mhm.
not. Which way would I vote? You know, and I think this can work. Actually, I think this can work. I think there are dangers. I think there are risks, and we'll probably talk about some of those. But I wouldn't want to just dismiss it because it's different. I think we've gone through and we are going through a period of innovation in our schools. And COVID did show us that there was a different way. Now, what would be the impact on students themselves from an emotional and social well-being perspective, and what would be the impact on students in terms of results? I think both of those we can't really answer at the moment, but I think broadly speaking, I'm in favour, and I think I kind of have to be in favour if I'm honest, because I sort of do a sort of hybrid, half-hearted effort at this myself, because I'm quite a big advocate of the flipped classroom, as you know. And the principle of that is that the students get their taught content aspect of the lesson at home from watching a video. You know, watch a 12-minute video and
Mhm.
all the waffle, it gets straight to the point. And students can watch that, they can rewind it, they can watch it again, they can watch it for revision, you know, all sorts of reasons why video is a great platform for that. And then when they come into the classroom, it gives me much more time to engage with question and answer, probing the subject deeper, and doing the things that otherwise I wouldn't have had time for, because I'd have taken 20 minutes, probably not 12 minutes, at the front of the classroom, just teaching the students something that they need to know before they can get going with activities and explore the subject at a deeper level. So I think it would be disingenuous for me to say, oh no, don't believe in this remote teaching, when essentially I think I'm kind of halfway there.
Yeah, I think it would be disingenuous for anybody to say that the ideal model isn't everyone's in the same room and socially learning from each other and building relationships there and then that they can, reinforce through other activities like being on duty and after school clubs and all that sort of stuff. I think that is a good model because the relationships you build with students are what helps support the learning when the learning's difficult or the push is hard to get past. But I really think it's absolutely crazy of us to say that this model can't work because we both taught in COVID, and I was, we had inspectorate watching some of my lessons because they were, just as good as they would have been in the classroom. But I taught in a slightly different way because we were remote. I took influence from YouTubers and Twitch streaming, and I installed a camera on my ceiling so they could see my desks if I was doing hand drawn stuff and I was planning. I could show them that. We use different stuff for programming, but I think we are in the computer science game. We are in a sort of a different niche because we know what the limitations are. We know what recruitment looks like for us. We know how difficult it is to get those subject experts in the classroom, and what a difference it is when you say to a class of year 11s, sorry guys, we couldn't recruit. It's going to be at least Christmas until we get somebody that can come in and help. Enjoy yourselves. And we've seen the repair work that we have to do as teachers, as heads of department, when we have to go into those classes after Christmas and we still haven't got somebody to come in, and we have to try our best to balance our teaching load and trying to help this other class that have had no subject specialists for the best part of 3 or 4 months. And we know the damage that can cause. I think it's a little bit different if you're in a subject that isn't a shortage subject, because then you've got a larger pool of candidates. But it still doesn't address the issues like, for instance, a number of years ago, I worked in a school that was in special measures and we're trying to improve. Trying to recruit for that school was difficult because you have to get a certain type of person who's willing to put in the time and effort. And, either there you get people very early in their careers, or you get people that are very experienced and willing to put in the time and the effort. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of either of those. And getting those people in the classroom is such hard work. I will just say, though, I think that we're kidding ourselves as well if we think just an existing classroom setup and jumping on Microsoft Teams is what this takes. To me, if you're going to invest in virtual teaching, you have to invest in better equipment for the classroom, making sure students have the ability and devices to communicate and send work directly to the teacher. You have to make sure that the support teacher in the classroom is adequately trained. And there are so many more things to think about. And I think I know we've read the news story about this, and I know we're not naming names, but the reaction to it feels like people are concerned that en masse will just be replacing the classroom teacher with a virtual teacher, and the rest of the sort of the student support stuff would be done by some admin assistant. And I think that's just unrealistic. This is a way of solving a recruitment crisis and a shortage that presumably, if the government have got recruitment right for teaching, is temporary.
Yeah, maybe. And we're not talking about all subjects, right? No one's advocating that we teach PE like this, right?
No, I would love to see it. One of those little iPad robots driving around outside.
Yeah. Although, again, because we are computer scientists and we teach computer science, it's easy for us to say, I guess, because as you said, we're over the technology, we understand it. But there's certain aspects of our subject that work really well in this setup. I mean, for example, when the students are programming, and you'll remember from your days at Replit, one of the great strengths of software applications like that is that you can see what students are coding in real time, and you can interact with them and their code in real time. And that's a massive advantage, because you might have been in a situation before where you were helping one student and you were sat next to them, and then because of the layout of the classroom, on the other side of the room, you don't really know what's going on, except for the fact that not a lot of work is going on. But when you can see all the students' screens at the same time, then you know what they're doing. And I'm just imagining myself, you talked about the tech, and it does require a different pedagogy, I completely agree. But I'm imagining that situation where the teacher can see all these electronic whiteboards, and they can see students attempting to answer questions, attempting to draw particular things, whatever it is that the activity entails. The teacher can see every student in real time, and then they can stop the activity, they can intervene, they can get immediately to the students that need the support, and they can nudge the students that obviously aren't making enough effort in a much more productive way. So I think we've got to be careful of just dismissing this, right?
I think one thing that works really well in that setup as well is the modeling you do. Because of the limitations of the technology and that it's one video call, when you're having a one-to-one with the students and say you're looking at their code and you're talking to them about it, you are broadcasting to the rest of the class in a way that's much more personal than it would be if you were sat in the corner talking to Jimmy. So the fact that it's being blasted for all to see and you're going, oh, that's interesting. Why did you do that? Oh, cool. I mean, maybe you can fix it like this, and this, and this. That modeling by itself is a strong pedagogical foundation for running a lesson, and has massive improvement benefits to how the students get on. But like, even if you were to take this to the extreme and run it in PE, like I think there are benefits to having, let's go to like a ridiculous example. Okay, let's say we've got our regular PE teacher that's here, and this week we've got an Olympian doing a remote teaching lesson for us, and they're going to show us form in, I don't know, boxing or whatever, and we get to see a bit of that remotely, and they get to critique styles and things like that in a lesson which is being facilitated by another expert in the room. I think opening the doors to virtual teaching opens the doors much more to interesting and exciting events like that, where yes, we might be having virtual lessons regularly in chemistry with Mr. Davis, who's on the other side of the world, but do you know what, we've got name a sports star here helping us out in PE this week. Isn't that an exciting reason to go and turn up and get changed and go and stand in the cold? I mean, it's not going to motivate me, but I'm sure it'll motivate people that enjoy PE.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely, and I think it's these things that are not fully analysed when the critics say, "Oh no, this is a complete erosion of teaching. This is a step in the wrong direction." And I think, you know, one of the problems with schools is we become so ingrained in the way we think it should work, and the way that parents perhaps think that it should work, that somehow that puts you in a straitjacket and you're not willing to take risks,
Mhm.
try something different, because we're so used to being taught, I wouldn't go so far as to say in a Victorian way anymore, although I might have said that when I started teaching. Things have evolved a lot in the last 25 years for sure, but you know, it's still quite traditional in many contexts. And this is just one of those ways of sort of breaking the mold and seeing what happens, I think. And probably we shouldn't dismiss it straight away. And for me, one of the most important things here that is kind of going to get lost in the argument is that we are enabling more students to learn the subject from an expert. And so there may be schools out there that say, oh, we can't offer physics A level. Oh, we can't offer GCSE computer
Mhm.
science. Oh, our top set maths students aren't going to get top set maths because we can only get a cover teacher in. And we're doing these students a massive disservice. I mean, I can imagine myself teaching hundreds of students in the evening something out of my subject area that a
I
lot
mean,
of other
wouldn't
teachers really struggle with.
I think that there'd be a big excitement to, hey, we got Dave from Craig and Dave doing our lesson. And it's gonna be a flipped classroom, and it's gonna be like a real exciting thing. I think that would generate a bit of buzz because you know you're a celebrity in the computer science teaching world. You're coming into a lesson, you're doing something remotely. Like I could even see myself, you know, like middle of the day, dialing into a school, doing 2 hours with year 11 computer science because they're struggling for classroom. You know, but I still wouldn't. I wouldn't go and do a full day's teaching there because I know that I'd end up on cover for PE. So there's
Mm.
there's a difference in motivation as well for the people doing it. But I think we're also like discounting a bunch of other technologies. We're assuming this is just somebody on a on like a virtual video link, a Teams call. But there are so many other technologies that can plug into this as well. You look at the advent of AI in the classroom, right? Between having an expert pedagogue coming in remotely to the lesson and supporting and being a subject specialist, between having AI to critique your code or and give you feedback, conformative feedback on what you're doing directly, the job of the person in the classroom becomes very much building those relationships and making sure that the lesson functions smoothly. And then between you, what you've actually got is not the situation that we've had since the Victorian times of I am the lone adult in my classroom. You've got a collection of people working toward the goal of making sure this group of students advances, understands, and improves. And I think
Mm.
when it becomes a team sport like that, what you've got is the added oomph of backup. You know, if somebody's
Yeah.
ill, we've got other people who know where they are and can keep them going. You've got the added advantage of extra knowledge because it's not down to one person's personality, whether they get on with everyone in the room. There's a bunch of people that make that experience for the students. And there are untold advantages. And I will just say, I do still think an ideal model is for the subject expert to be in the room and making those relationships. But where you can't have that, there's nothing wrong at all with virtual teaching.
Yeah, and you've reminded me of a situation I'd completely forgotten about, actually, that we trialed when I was head of department in one of my old schools. It just so happened that the timetable had worked out that we had all four GCSE classes timetabled at the same time with different teachers.
Mhm.
And we looked at that and thought, well, we're all introducing these topics in exactly the same way with the same resources. Why don't we, for the first lesson, pull everybody together? And we had what was called a learning center, a glorified library essentially, but it had a massive open space. um, but it was flexible, so you could get, you know, seating in there for everybody and whatnot. And so we thought, let's do this in the learning center. Got all the classes in one place, and I remember sort of delivering the introduction to this thing. And then we kind of got them going, so it wasn't just a gimmick with something to do there and then. And us four teachers were mingling and helping students that were not in our own classes. We were just all in it together, right? And I'd completely forgotten about that experience. And we really enjoyed it because we felt really supported. If someone was kicking off, you had four teachers dealing with the issue. You weren't just dealing with it on your own, right? And because there were a larger number of students in the situation, the individual students felt a little bit silly if they weren't sort of doing what they should be doing. That kind of herd mentality kicked in because they weren't just with their mates, they were with other people that they didn't always associate it with in this lesson, you know. And so it was really just a hive of productivity. I'd completely forgotten about that. And of course, we only did it for 1 year because the following year the timetable just didn't align in that way. So I'd completely forgotten that that was a thing. So it's interesting. Schools that have taken this approach do report that there is improved attendance, better behaviour, perhaps in ways I've just explained, and attainment's gone up as well. But I think the biggest criticism, something that you sort of touched upon, is that relationship between the teacher and the student. And you've said, look, we're not intending to replace all teaching. We're doing this in a situation where either it can have the biggest impact or we genuinely have a recruitment problem here and we don't want to disadvantage students. But people would say you're never going to get this same level of care and particularly the support for special educational needs and disabilities in that situation. I don't know what your thoughts are there.
No, I think like 2 points to make here. I think one, in that situation you talked about, isn't it nice to have multiple colleagues that can go, I love databases. I'm the biggest database nerd in the world. Let me teach that. I love, and you know what I'm like for like ethics and stuff. I love the ethics unit. I could talk about it all day. I'd love to teach that. And you can use your skills to teach something, and everyone gets the most passionate version of the delivery. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is one of my issues with recruitment and education is that we as an industry struggle to pay more for people that we need because we've got standardized salary scales, and there's a real pushback against giving people more to get somebody in the classroom when we need them because they've got a special skill or they're particularly good with this kind of student, or they've got a special educational need focus. We've got a real problem with that as an industry. Whereas if you're in private industry, well, we need that person for this project, and there's only 6 of them in the country, so we'll pay them more, and we'll get the good one. Like, I don't want to be in a situation where schools with more money get better teachers, certainly, but it would be nice to be in a position where schools that are in need of a very specialist teacher to fill a gap and are struggling can do something about that. Now, in a virtual teaching model, you've got a much bigger pool of people because you're not just pooling the people who can reasonably commute to your school and are willing to give up 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, plus whatever after school activities and time that you need to put into marking, go into being a full-time teacher. I'm sure you're in this situation as well. I taught in schools where I was the only subject specialist, schools where I was one of multiple. Where I was one of multiple, we would make a big deal about class arrangements. Who works better with which kind of student? Who has better understanding of this special educational need? Who is better with behavior management for this kind of student? And we'd make an effort to make sure the classes were arranged in a way that the most effective person took that class. Now, let's just imagine this in a virtual circumstance where we have, oh, hey, okay, this group this year is very SEN heavy. Why don't we get the virtual SEN computer science specialist, of which there's probably a handful in the country. Let's bring them in. They can talk strategies, they can plan, they can prepare for the stuff in the lesson, talk support with the person in the room, and really make impact on those people's lives. And I think finally, I think that the thing I want to say on the idea of pay and theme and stuff is just that these virtual lessons are not going to be cheaper than putting a teacher on your payroll and putting them in a classroom. You still need to have a classroom. You still need to have a teacher in the room. You are going to be paying for more equipment and better bandwidth. And you are going to be paying another person, presumably a subject expert that can command a reasonably high hourly rate, to come into these lessons. It's more money than I'm sure most schools want to spend on running a lesson, but it's kind of a needs must thing. If we want a subject specialist in the room, it's better to spend a little bit more money and make the running of this lesson more expensive for a year than to try our best to cut costs and not have a subject specialist pedagogue in the room for 6 months. I think the damage that can be done by that is significant if it's not managed properly. And let's be honest, teaching timetables are so crazy and the responsibilities are so much that a lot of these non-subject specialists in classrooms don't have the time to be managed properly or as you want, or given the support we'd like. And I think the virtual model definitely lends itself to having all the ticks in the right places, even if it is a bit more expensive. No school is trying to run this to cut costs. The schools trying to do this are trying to do it specifically to get expert teachers in front of young people where they need it.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the problem. People are jumping to the wrong conclusions, and that's certainly one of them, that it's a cost-cutting exercise, and it's not. And the other conclusion people are jumping to is, oh, the students won't be prepared for exams if they're all on their tablet devices, etc. Well, they don't have to be all the time. I mean, you have another practitioner in the classroom. There's no reason you can't give them a paper and pen exercise. You know, it can still be done. That's not a problem. But interestingly, again, schools have found that it hasn't disadvantaged students for written exams at all. And I'm not surprised by that, because do you know what? Tablets, laptops, computers, they've been in education for a long time now. And a lot of teachers make a lot of use of them. And there are many schools out there that are kind of, Google Chrome schools, iPad schools, whatever. And it's not that that device completely dominates the teaching. It's not like those students are on those devices, 5 lessons a day out of 5, but it is augmenting the teaching experience. It is making the learning experience better. It is providing a tool in the same way that a calculator provides a tool for maths. So people are jumping to conclusions here. And I think we probably ought to just mention some of the fears that the unions have put out there, because you would expect the teaching unions to be in favour of this, because they want flexible working, they want parity with the private sector in many ways, and they understand the workload issues and the recruitment crisis in teaching and everything. So it's somewhat surprising that they've kind of reacted to this in a negative way, but I wonder if that's because they see it as a slow, well, the thin end of the wedge, the slow erosion of classical teaching, and sort of once this thing starts to take hold, it'll be like a beast you can never control again. I don't know. What do you think?
I think there's an element of truth to that, but I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing. I think people are often scared of change, and are often scared for what that will mean for the employment sector. And in a world where we're constantly told that, oh, ChatGPT can teach you anything you want, and where I just learn everything from YouTube. I mean, yeah, maybe, but it's not the same as social learning. It's not the same as being in a classroom with a teacher. And I'd say the vast majority of young people and the vast majority of adults learn better in a social setting. Now, I think the unions, as you say, are reacting to the thin end of the wedge, and are concerned that if this works in this model, that it could be used by schools, maybe more unscrupulous schools, to say, oh, we've got this chemistry teacher 2 hours a week for your students, and the rest of the time they'll be, an LSA in the classroom. I don't think that's really what anybody wants in this situation. They just want to augment what they're currently doing. And I understand why the reaction is as it's been, but I think we've got to be very careful as an industry not to react in the most draconian ways, and react with, no, I'm not standing for this, ban it. Because in my teaching career, which I'll be honest has been 20 years, not as long as some people's, right? I have seen, oh, the internet, ban it. Oh, YouTube, ban it. Oh, Wikipedia, ban it. Oh, phones in the classroom, ban it. Oh, AI, ban it. None of these technologies have gone away. And it seems ridiculous to me. And I'll be honest with you, it's one of the reasons that I don't teach in a classroom setting anymore, is because during COVID, it really showed me that I could be as effective as I was going in every day without the need to travel and deal with all the sort of sitting around for an hour whilst I wait for the next lesson to start, and all that game time in the summer, which I know is great for planning, but it's hot and there's no air conditioning. But there's a bunch of reasons why I felt that I was very effective remotely, and then just to be told we're back in the classroom and that's it, no hybrid approaches, no nothing, is very disappointing when you're doing a good job at building a new skill set and building effective tooling at being pedagogically sound in a different medium. And I think there must be a lot of teachers, because there's a shortage in the profession, a lot of people that have left because of the frustrations of the day-to-day, and not because of the lack of love for the teaching. I love teaching. I will say I'm a teacher until the day I die. I still, if something exciting comes up, I go on a rant like, oh, this is amazing because of this, and this, and look at this. And I remember once grabbing a whiteboard pen and just drawing on a window because I was just excited and talking and I hadn't have it in my pocket. That never goes away. And if we can tap into that sector, if we can tap into those people that want a bit more flexible working, I think that's a good thing all around. But we need, as an industry, to not be quite as reactive to innovation and change. Just because we've always done it one way doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, and we should try it, and we should use the research informed model to see if it's working or not.
Absolutely. There we go. So again, this is a bit of a myth that there wouldn't be career progression opportunities as well, because this is a new pedagogy, this is a new way, and you're going to get teachers that are good at this, you're going to get teachers that struggle with this, and you're going to get expert teachers at this. And there's no reason why they wouldn't be promoted to head up a department of virtual teaching. Maybe I'm going a bit too far here, but there's no reason why a virtual teacher can't progress to be a head of department or an assistant head teacher, a head of year, deputy head, whatever it is going to be in the future. Because at the end of the day, they're not always sat in their bedroom talking remotely to students, right? They are going to be in schools as well, unless we go for a very, very radical model. But I still think there's plenty of opportunity for progression. Look, Kat, it's been absolutely great having you here today. Thank you so much for joining me. Fantastic, thought-provoking discussion. And I'm sure that there are going to be loads of teachers out there that agree with us. And I'm sure there are going to be a load of teachers out there that disagree with us. So please put your views in the comments below. We want to hear them. We're not always right, but we certainly got opinions. So until next time, we'll see you at the Chalk Face.